Okay.
Okay. And this is Tammy Smart. She's been in the industry for 16 years. She's one of our 4 escrow officers. So she's going to be going over through the mock closing. Typically when we host this in the office, we talk about where to park. We do have 2 Chicago title parking spots in the parking garage. So typically I let agents know, if you want to let your client park there, we can kind of show you where that is. Whenever you walk in, our receptionist does have an office calendar, so you just kind of check in with her. Her main role is to make you look like a rock star. So she's going to get to know you, she's going to get to know your name, so when you walk in, she's going to greet you and your clients. We have a full coffee bar. Typically she asks if you or your client want anything to drink, but your clients are more than happy to help themselves because it is full, so many different options. At that point, she'll either seat you in the closing room, or you'll wait maybe a couple minutes, and then one of our escrow officers, whoever you're closing with, will come and get you. Okay? And then Tammy, she's basically just going to go through this as if it's a mock closing. This is what you want out of it. So other than going through all the documents and everything, if y'all have any questions, please stop her and ask, because that's what this is all about. So other than that,
yay!
Take it away, Tammy.
Okay. Kelsey, I didn't know if you wanted me to go over the open order checklist, or do you want to do this at the end?
Yeah, we can do that at the end.
Okay.
I think will be best.
Okay. Well, the little packet here that each of you have, of course, it's yours to keep, so you can write on it, mark it up, doodle on it, whatever y'all are comfortable with. And also, of course, if there's questions that you have throughout, don't wait till the end. Just stop me. Just say, Tammy, I have a question. So, and I don't mind. The first is just a brochure, just introducing the mock closing for today. The next is the settlement statement. Now, of course, we have whited out the personal information of the buyer and seller or the lender, and just basically put it with just a generic 123 Main Street, and then Peter buyer and Angela buyer, and then Richie seller, just for the protection of, of the clients. The front page, starting at the top, working from left to right, of course you have box 1 through box 5. This just lets you know what type of loan it is that your buyer, if you're on the buyer's side, what type of loan they're getting. Box 6, this would be where our GF number is located, or our file number. Box 7 is the buyer's loan number. Whenever the lender sends us over closing instructions, the loan number is normally, or is on their instructions, and we get it directly from there. The mortgage insurance case number, or box 8, that would be if it's an FHA or a VA loan. Then you'd see a case number listed in that box. Okay, box D, this is for your buyer's information. Of course, it would have how the loan is styled. So this one in particular would be Peter buyer and Angela buyer at 987 Main Street in Spring. And then box E is going to be your seller name and their information. If you are on the listing side, we try to have the seller's forwarding addresses prior to closing, because we typically like to put in their forwarding address here versus the property address. So that information, if it can be provided ahead of time, is fabulous. Box F, this is for your lender name and lender address. And then box G, property location, this is the property address and the legal description that we're closing on. And then box H and F, these are the settlement agent, which of course Chicago title, and then place of settlement gives our work address. And then box I, or box L, is the settlement date, and then the disbursement date, meaning if it's a sale, of course, these are going to be the same. It would be March 12th, and then March 12th is your disbursement date. Okay, a little bit further down, I know it kind of looks confusing, but sections 100.
Just a real quick question. Disbursement date, is that like funding date?
That would be your funding date. Yes, ma'am. Okay. And then section 100 and section 400, basically this first page is going to be your credit debits. So the 100 section, these are all of your buyer charges. And then section 400, these are all of your seller credits. So up in the 100 and 400 section, if the property is in an HOA, this is where you're going to see the prorated HOA dues. The 200 section and the 500 section, again, it's...
Where are the HOA dues now? Am I missing them?
No, actually on this one, it didn't have an HOA company.
Okay.
Or HOAs, so, but you would see it. It would have been prorated from beginning of the, or from the day of closing through the end of the year.
Okay.
Okay, and then the 200 section, these are all of your buyer credits. And then the 500 section, these are all of your seller debits. In the 200 and 500 section, this is of course where you're going to see the earnest money credit back to your buyer. If it is a lender, of course, if the lender is giving any type of rebates or closing cost credits, it would have them listed here in this section as well. Also, the option fee credit back to the buyer is listed in the 200 section, along with the seller credit for the owner's title policy and the guarantee fee. Because you'll see that on page 2 when we get there, we always charge in the buyer column, and then on this front page is where the seller gives them a credit back for that. Okay. And then in the 500 section, this is where you would see your, if the seller does have a mortgage payoff, we'd have the payoff listed here, and then also the debits, because the seller's giving back the buyer credit for option fee, and then of course the guarantee fee with the owner's title policy. Also, you're going to see, and it's kind of like a wash, on line 211 and 511, this is the prorated taxes for the property from the beginning of the year through the day of closing. So we always make sure that the buyer understands that the seller is giving them a credit for the length of time that they did not occupy or own the property. So when taxes come due and payable at the end of the year, then of course that buyer is responsible for the full year. Okay. Any questions on the front page? Not yet? Okay.
Not yet, yes.
Okay, not yet.
Only had wisdom to see if they got it.
No, I didn't
Yeah.
want to go page 2 and go back to page 1.
Okay, so on page 2, the 700 section, this is where you're going to find your commission. And of course, we always have the commission listed out to your broker. We never show a disbursement, how much an agent is getting and how much the broker is getting. It's just a one lump sum on the HUD, just for disclosure purposes. Okay, the 800 section, again, this is for your buyer. This is where all their lender charges are going to be. And then the 900 section, this is for the interest that's being collected on their new loan, along with, if it's FHA or VA, of course you'd have mortgage insurance or a VA funding fee. And then we're also collecting, typically your buyers don't pay it out outside of closing, their 1-year homeowner's policy. We just collect it through closing. And so that's what that line 903 is. The 1000 section, this would be if your buyer is setting up escrows with their mortgage, meaning paying property taxes and homeowner's insurance. Okay, the 1100 section, these are our title charges. Line 1102, you'll see at Chicago Title, we charge our closing fee, our settlement fee, it's $250. I know that's basically the only fee that we can work with the state of Texas. Every title company charges a different escrow fee, but $250 is fairly low from what I can remember from other title companies or compared to. If there's any document prep fees that we're charging the seller or the buyer, it would be listed here, like line 1109 and 1110. The 1200 section, this is all for recording. It'd be for recording the warranty deed with the county. Also, if there is a mortgage, collecting for recording for the deed of trust. And then also, if the property is in a water district, we're collecting for a water district notice. If there's deed restrictions, we would do a deed restriction notice. And then any other miscellaneous recordings, whether it's power of attorney, any type of affidavits that need to be recorded at closing.
When do the deed restrictions need to be recorded?
The deed restriction should, if the property is located in a PUD or a deed restriction, those are already been recorded
Okay.
with whenever the developer did all that.
Okay.
Excuse me, the 1300 section. These are any additional settlement charges, and typically in this section you would find survey charges if a new survey needed to be ordered. You would also see if the seller is picking up a home warranty for the buyer, be listed here as well. Any type of transfer fees, if there's any type of, say a buyer or seller can't attend closing, then we would go through bank server, which is a signing service that we use, that would be able to go to them. And of course they would charge a fee for that, depending on what area and depending what state they're in.
Similar to like a DocuSign?
No, because it's wet signatures. It would be an actual person going to either their place of business or their home.
Oh, okay.
And that is bonded, of course. And typically what they do is they'd go there and get the signatures. They would email back the package to us before dropping it in FedEx, just so we can look through it to make sure signatures are completed, initials are completed, just before we allow that notary to drop that package back to us. And then, of course, on line 1307 and 1308, sometimes you'll see this whenever you have sellers. One, maybe they're getting divorced, but they're both required to sign at closing. Or if you have two single people entitled, maybe it was an investment home, and say they want their proceeds divided 50-50, or one seller gets this amount and one seller gets another amount. We always list it here in the 1300 section so that there's no confusion on which seller got what amount of money. Okay, any questions on the second page? No? Okay. Okay, and then the third page, this is the comparison page or the GFE page. At the top, it's a comparison chart, and what it does, it compares with the good faith estimate that the buyer or buyers got throughout the loan process versus the fees that are actually being collected on the settlement statement. And then the bottom half, that just goes over a brief description of the loan terms that the buyers are getting. And of course, that second bucket charges that in total cannot increase more than 10%. Say if your lenders do go over that 10% mark, maybe stuff that was on their GFE wasn't quite quoted right and the actual fees came in higher, then of course that's where you see the lender cures credits on page 1, because they just have to cure those either at closing or not shortly thereafter. Okay, and then page 4, the HUD-1 attachment. This isn't any additional fees or charges. It basically just breaks down the 1100 section, which is our title charges. It breaks them down line item so that the buyers and sellers can see, because a lot of the fees that are on page 2, they're lump sum together. And this just breaks it down to where they're easier to read. So as far as the HUD goes, there any questions or something that kind of sticks out that you want more clarification on, or?
There is, just afterwards, I'm gonna have to digest it on you.
Okay. Okay.
So the title company's only fees, like yours are $250, is that the only thing they pay you guys?
What that comes to, say, Chicago Title?
Right.
Yes, the rest of the fees are either going to an attorney, a taxing service, or an underwriter.
Okay, and like origination fees and all that, that comes from the lender, the lending side.
Correct. Okay. Okay.
I know if I was in that closing, I'd have a question. You know, could it be after you?
And typically what we do is we'll send, once we work up the HUD, we'll send it to the lender for them to approve it and make sure everything's okay. And then once we have an approved HUD, of course, I would then send it out to you guys as seller and buyer's agent. Let y'all review it, and then if you would like, I always send to sellers and buyers for them to review prior to closing. And I always let them know that once they review it, they can always call me. Just to where we're the ones that prepared the HUD, so it's not fair for them to go back to you guys for questions when they can just call us and we can go over it with them line by line, so they're a little bit more comfortable when they come into closing. Okay.
And what paperwork are y'all waiting for from the lender to prepare that HUD one? Because I've had it where the title companies come in, still waiting from the lender, and we've got it closing in like 4 hours.
Typically, we're waiting on the closing instructions.
Okay, and what is exactly is that?
Basically, the closing instructions, it gives us a breakout of how they want the HUD style. Maybe it has all their lender fees included in it. It has a copy of the GFE so that we can get our comparison chart accurate. And then, of course, it has the loan terms, what their interest rate is, how many years, what type of loan it is, whether it's conventional, uninsured, insured, FHA, or VA. But typically, whenever we're stating that we're waiting on the lender, 9 times out of 10, it's usually always it's the closing instructions that we're waiting on.
And that's when you get all of the amounts that you put in here really is from the lender.
Correct. Yeah, any credits that they happen to be giving to the buyer on page 1 in the 200 section, we would get that from them as well.
Okay.
Along with the 800 section and the 900 section would be coming from the lender.
But now you guys are setting up the escrow account, or are they?
The lender is.
The lender? You mainly just work with title issues.
Correct. Yeah, we work on the title end. Now, of course, we work very closely with lenders just to make sure that they've got everything that they need, and they make sure that we have everything that we need so that we're both moving forward and not one's waiting on the other.
And you do the deeds in the water strip, like 1200 government recording and transfer charges. You do those. The lender doesn't do that, right?
The lender will do the warranty deed, typically the vesting deed, and they'll also prepare their own deed of trust. But the water district notice, deed restriction notice, and if there was a power of attorney, we do those.
And you order the survey.
Yes, and we will order a survey, but we have to have written authorization to do so
From the lender or from who?
from the buyer.
From the buyer. Okay.
And typically, if we know that there is a new survey that does need to be ordered, we always are in contact with the lender to let them know that we would like to have a clear to close or final approval before we order a survey, just to make sure that the loan is going through and it's a good deal. Although surveyors, they know that things happen, and of course we've had to return, not many, but a few surveys. You don't see that often where a surveyor ask for payment if a deal cancels. If it's acreage and it's several $1,000s, of course, normally they'll get a deposit up front or they'll ask for payment up front.
What would a typical survey cost be on a subdivision home?
For a typical lot and block, it's 400 plus tax, so running about 425, 430.
What about a 5 or 6 acre property?
That can be anywhere from $800 to $1,200. We had one that was 5 acres, and we actually found a surveyor that would do it for $900. So, but our time frame isn't all that great, but it was cheaper for the buyer since it was acreage. But
You guys are the ones that orders the home warranty too, if that's in a contract.
yes, we'll always ask the buyer's agent who the buyer would like for us to order through. And we typically like to order that prior to closing as well, so that we have an invoice, just so we can pass it on to the buyer, even though we collect for it. But it has like their contract number, their plan number on it, and then a customer service telephone number.
And do you keep the agent and either whatever side you're representing, do you call them throughout the process so they're not wondering what stage we're at?
We do, as much as the lender will give us, but we will keep everybody posted, just because we don't represent the seller or the buyer, but we like for everybody to be in the loop with everybody. And we just don't take it that a lender's contacting a buyer or a buyer's agent. We'll send an email and follow up with a phone call too, just to make sure that we're all on the same page together. Because we don't like surprises toward the end or anything like that. Ones that we can avoid, we try to. Okay, after the settlement statement, basically these are not all of a lender package, but we took out the most important ones that are in a lender package. So the first one is the certification to the HUD. And this is a lender document. Just basically, all parties sign this, just stating that everyone's gone over the settlement statement and we're all on the boat knowing what fees are being collected and what they're being collected for. Basically, you're acknowledging by signing that the fees on the settlement statement are true and correct.
Okay, this is this one?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mhm.
But you have to have a HUD one before you can sign this.
Right. This would be part of your. Yeah, this would be part of your the closing package at the table.
Oh, okay. So I'm like, man, sometimes we do get a HUD one until the day before.
Yes.
That was
Chase
the
down
norm.
signatures
And that's kind of the norm, isn't it?
the day before.
Typically, you've got some just between different lenders. You can get some 2-3 days in advance. Some of them are 24 hours prior to closing.
Like, who are the top 3 good lenders, you would say?
Trick question.
Yeah, that you have the
I-
least amount of problems with it.
I'm going to sign that since you're on.
Yeah, we deal a lot with different lenders, and for the most part, they're all really good.
But
So,
let me throw some real world on this.
Okay.
In my experience, you're going to get that HUD one about 15 minutes before closing. And I know the law says 24 hours notice, but I'm saying in actual experience, I'm not getting them that soon. It's right to the wire.
See, that's what I've experienced.
That's
too.
what I recollect that from back.
And then they ask you, does this look okay? And it's like, I'm just,
It's all new to me.
yes.
yeah. Well, I know that I myself and the other closers, I've been in the same boat where I was buying, and the buyers want to know what their cashier check needs to be, or what they're going to wire. So, just from personal experience, along with our other closers, we try to get those HUDs out as fast as we can. Just because we know with everybody's situation, you're on a timeline. And it's not fun when you're getting to the closing table and finding out what you have to bring. So we do try our darndest to get that way in advance, or at least 24 hours in advance.
And you
We
take
try.
care- You would rather, from your side of it, if we had to do any type of negotiation on repairs, you'd rather fix it on the contract instead of having to go to closing and exchange money.
Yeah, that
You don't need
typically.
to go there.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Say that again? give you cash out on an option, or not option, but when you do repairs instead of fixing them, and it's like, they want to give, okay, well, I'll just give them $2,000 and, yeah. So we're better off taking it off the price than having to.
Yeah, I mean, we've had amendments come in. As long as, I mean, usually if it's the day of closing that we're making these, it's just a lot harder for amendments to get to lenders and they approve it. Usually it's already gone through underwriting and it's approved as is. So when you start throwing in seller contribution and stuff like that, sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult. But if it's within a week or so or a couple of days, go ahead and just do an amendment. And then we'll make sure that it does get over to the lender.
You may also weigh in here just for a second. A lot of lenders are going to have heartburn over contributions for repairs because they're going to say, "What is this property not in good condition?"
Good point.
So you'll save yourself a lot of trouble with lenders if you can have those things repaired or price adjusted, but do not reflect that the property's not in pristine condition in the contract.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we go back to this?
The HUD 1 attachment?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Does it state it in the one in what we just went through?
State what?
That this is like an attachment? And this, that, and
It says head
It, HUD 1 attachment?
but does it reflect it in here, in the statement?
Oh, it will see additional 1101 items, but no, it won't. It doesn't reflect that.
Okay,
Other
so
than
you-
just see additional, and then it moves
so
it.
you don't really get this until you get here. There's no indication of it up front. But this is more. Yes.
Well, no, I mean it gets sent out with your HUD statement.
Okay.
It's all one document.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
it's not like you just get the first 2-3 pages and that's it. You get the entire thing.
Okay.
And it's typically 4-5 pages long.
So where are these numbers reflected on this HUD 1? On this?
The bottom line, line 1400, is that the, because the buyer column and the seller column on page 2, that line 1400, this is the total of all these fees that are in each person's or each client's column.
And that's what this attachment is?
No, the attachment just goes over, breaks down the 1100 section, the title charges.
Oh, thank you. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, just the title charges. Everything in this section here is broken down on this HUD 1 attachment.
Okay, that's what was confusing me too. This just refers to the 1100.
Exactly.
Ah,
Yes.
so I'm like, where are these numbers?
Yeah, because everything in the 1100 section, it's all lump sum together. It doesn't break it down.
Okay.
And so the HUD 1 attachment breaks it down so that if buyers or sellers want to know what's included in that fee, it shows them. Kind of like an itemized list.
Yes.
Tammy, do you want to touch on too, when you get into the room, you know, who has what papers in front of them and kind of how, you know, who receives what, who receives the full package, who receives just the HUD?
So in closing, of course, everybody's going to get a copy of the settlement statement, just so that we can review it. If there's anything that we need to go over prior to signing. And of course, the HUD 1 attachment that's included with the HUD 1 document. Anything that I guess anything like the seller signs. Okay. Like this warranty deed, which is behind the HUD 1 settlement page. This is a document that the seller only signs. This is the vesting deed, basically from the owners going to the new buyer. This is the document also that we record with the county. Okay. Let's see, and then the payment letter, which is after the warranty deed. Of course, only the buyer gets this because it's just a breakdown of their payment, what's included in that. Okay. Okay. And then the next document is going to be the note. And then the buyer, of course, gets a copy of this only, because this goes over what their interest rate is, the terms of their loan, when the payment's due, and then of course their loan amount. Okay. And then the next form is the itemization of amount financed. Oops, sorry, I skipped one. The truth in lending. Okay. And this is also a buyer form. Only the buyer sees this. And it's kind of scary, but you know, a lot of people nowadays want to know how much how much the house is once it's all said and done. And of course, your little boxes up there give that. And a lot of buyers are like, oh my goodness. But also it will inform the buyer as well if there's prepayment penalties for them to pay their loan off early. And then also when the late fees or late charges start in every month once their payment is received or would be late. Right, on page 2. Up there in that top box, it gives. Okay, and then the itemization of amount financed. This breaks down how the lender arrived at their loan amount. It just shows what's all included. And this, of course, also is a buyer-only document. And then the deed of trust. This is the document that puts the lien on the property because it does get recorded. And it's the buyer's obligation, basically a contract between that buyer and their lender that they are obligated to pay the loan back. I kind of tell everybody this document's kind of like a no pay, no stay type. If you don't pay your mortgage, you can't stay there. Correct. This is only a buyer document.
Can I ask you what may seem like an unrelated question? Is there a separate contract document for a contingency if, you know, if a buyer has to sell a property before they can close on what they're purchasing? Mm-hmm. Is there a separate, like an addendum or something for that?
Unless the lender will provide one, but there is a separate document or a separate. It's like a contingency amendment.
I know there's a release of a contingency, but there is a contingency addendum or amendment?
Mm-hmm. And I will look that up and I'll email it just for y'all to.
So they can actually get this far to buy a property before the property that's holding key has sold?
If their lender approves them with them having that mortgage still out there, though.
So they have to qualify for.
They would have to, yes.
If they have enough clout to cover both, then you can do that in that situation.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Wow. I did not know that.
But their lender would have to approve them that way.
Okay.
Okay. And then the deed of trust, it's 15 pages, and then it has a few riders towards the end of it. So then the next document that you're going to come to, and then second home rider, that just states that this property is being purchased as a second home for these buyers. And you would only see that if it's going to be their second home or investment. And if the property, excuse me, if the property was in a planned unit development, you'd have what is called a PUD rider, a PUD rider. And then that would always also be attached to your deed of trust.
And that's if it's the first time.
Or no, if it's in a planned unit development.
So that would be part of there would be an amendment to these 15 pages.
Right, or it would be a rider to the end of the deed of trust document.
Okay, and that's if it was a PUD or,
Or planned unit development.
Like a master plan community?
Mm-hmm.
or that just a water district?
No, you wouldn't have a rider for that.
Only PUD.
Okay. And then the next document you're going to come to, and we always have these in all of our, it's a buyer's walkthrough. And then the buyer will sign this. We'll have this with all of our closing packages, just in case the agents didn't have one with them or they had it and they just forgot it. We always have another one that we'll have the buyer sign at closing as well. And then the next document is letter of authorization. This is a seller document only. What this is that if you have a seller who has a HELOC or a line of credit or a home equity loan, we always have them sign these at closing, just closing out the line of credit that they currently have on the home so no more draws can be made on it. And we send this original, of course, to the payoff lender with the payoff check. And a lot of times when we order these type of line of credit payoffs, they will have a signature page on that payoff statement.